Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I played a couple of minutes ago, where my opponent decided to play into one of the weirdest and most offbeat openings that I've ever seen, but I managed to get a good position out of it. So let's get into it. I start off the game with d4, and my opponent already shocks me on the first move with the move b5, and you know that when you get a move like b5 on move 2, your opponent's going to have preparation. And that's why I started to think, because obviously the best move is e4. Hands down, the best move is e4, simply taking both pawns in the center. But this is exactly what he wants. And this is what I know, because what my opponent's going to do is probably going to play bishop e7. I don't know, I probably have to play knight d2, and already white is having to play some awkward looking moves. And in reality, even though the engine says +1, my opponent is going to have fun because he has theory in this position. And theory is everything at higher levels. So I was thinking, I was like, why am I going to play e4 and play directly into what he wants? You know what? I'm just going to play something normal. I'm just going to play a normal developing move that's not e4. I'm not going to play e4 because that's exactly what he wants me to do, and he definitely has theory there. Instead of the e4, I played knight to f3. Which I also thought made a lot of sense. Obviously not the right move, but this is what you gotta do when you're playing against some weirdo who plays b5 on move 1. You always gotta try and get them out of their theory, because the point of b5 is to get you out of your theory. It's a ton of psychology, but you gotta out theory their theory of their theory, and then play chess. That's what you do. That's what you do. My opponent obviously plays move bishop b7, which is the whole point. And actually, computer's still saying e4 because after this thinks that white is slightly better. I don't really enjoy this position. I already decided that I wasn't going to play e4 because my opponent definitely has lines there. So instead of that, I played a very simple move. I played bishop f4. And I'm just arguing, you know what? I'm going to play a little bit more passively, e3. And I'm going to try and play on the queen side where my opponent is wanting to have fun. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think my opponent is going to be prepared for this line. I'm just going to go e3, c4, try to put a rook on c1 and start targeting pawns over here. Maybe I'll play a5 at some point. And I was just kind of thinking that already my opponent doesn't really seem to know what they're doing. Of course, I'm spending time in the opening and my opponent is not. But I think it's a bluff. My opponent plays e6, reasonable move. I simply play the move e3, attacking the pawn on b5. He has to do something about it. This isn't one of those cases where you can sacrifice the pawn. Sacrificing the pawn just leads nowhere. So my opponent simply defends it with the move a6, which I thought made a lot of sense. And I thought here for a good bit of time. And my whole thought process was, if I play c4, which is the most natural move in the position, and what I did end up playing, if I play c4, I was a little bit worried about the move b5. And a lot of the time in these types of structures, the move c4 is meant so then you can put the knight on c3 instead of on d2. But then I had like a bit of an epiphany, and I realized, you know what? I can just break the rules here. If c4 b5, I can play knight d2, and even though I've kind of not taken what I want from c4, I still have the space advantage, and this pawn becomes a weakness to a6. I don't really care that the pawn is this far advanced because my knight isn't going to develop to either of these squares. And I'm just like, you know what? I think that position is pretty good. The other side is c3, and then putting the knight on d2 and having a little more of a solid position. But I thought that I needed to interact with him, and I didn't think that this was the right way of playing. Another move was a4 that I calculated, but I didn't think it went anywhere. So I played c4. My opponent clearly wanted to play the move b4, which I thought was just the most natural move in the position. And I thought for a little bit, and I played the best move, played knight bd2. I'm very happy with this calculation. And I'm just arguing that this pawn is a weakness. This pawn is probably going to go a5 at some point. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm just going to go after this. Like, this is the target now. And the fact that he doesn't have any center control is just really good for me. And the opening experiment for black is honestly just wrong. My opponent still has only spent 10 seconds, but white is considerably better. My opponent plays knight f6. Pretty good move. I don't think too long. I play bishop d3 because obviously I don't want the knight coming here and I need to develop my bishop. My opponent plays c5, and I have to think a little bit, but I kind of already know what I'm going to do. I already had the plan here to go castles, which is the right move. This is all realized out, I thought that, okay, he's going to play c5 at some point, going to target my center. But at the end of the day, even if he takes, I can probably just take back with the pawn or with the knight. In some lines, he has a fork here, but not here. And I probably might just take back with the pawn and argue I have these two nice pawns. Your king is still in the center, and white is better. So I just castled here, and my opponent immediately goes wrong. My opponent here, I believe he's bluffing. There's either two things my opponent is doing with this move, which is the move d5, which he spent 4 seconds on. There's either two reasons why he played this move. The first is that he's bluffing and he wants me to think that we're still in theory. I already kind of think that we're out of theory right now, so I don't think that d5 is correct. That's the reason why he played it so fast. Either he wants to like make me believe it's theory, or the other reason is because he actually thinks it's theory. He's like messed up the position, and he sees this common idea of going d5. Oh, maybe there's this d5 line and some other lines, but here it just doesn't work, and he's messed up already, and white just has the advantage. Sure, I'm down 30 seconds, but it's +2, and that's kind of enough to win. I just go rook c1, which I thought made a lot of sense. I'm just bringing my rook to where it wants to be. I didn't really calculate anything. I just thought this was the right move. I mean, I'm getting my pieces onto like where the action is. I'm trying to get my bishop in there. White is clearly better here. I thought maybe a move is like bishop d6 here, but even this, I mean, I guess I'm just winning to pawn. Yeah, I guess I'm just winning to pawn for this. This pawn is going to be lost. And it's just really tough for black. My opponent plays knight bd7. I think for a little bit, and I just play the most forcing line, which I just realized I win a pawn in. Actually, no, this is not what happens. I still play the most forcing line, just because I open up my rook, not because I win a pawn. My bad. And I just play cd. I'm saying, okay, if you take with this, obviously I can't take with the knight due to the fork, with the knight defending now, attacking both the bishop and the knight. But I'm just going to take back with the pawn. I'm going to argue that if you're going to take back with the knight, I have like open files. My queen might come out to a4. My rook's going to come out here after my bishop drops back, of course. And then, like, I don't know, my knight gets in like this. There's checks here. And it just looks like black is getting eviscerated everywhere. So I'm just like, cool. I like when black gets eviscerated. And after knight d5, my opponent decided not to take. But he played knight d5 instead, which made sense. But, I mean, my move is already kind of set in stone. Was the wrong move, though. I played bishop g3. Which is inaccurate. I probably should have played bishop g5. A little bit stupid of me. I've always like missed this idea of bishop g5. Like, it's a very common idea, but for some reason, bishop g5 to me just never seems like the right move. Like here I'm actually just doing really well after bishop e7, knight e4, and there are some like serious problems with like this pawn and stuff, but for some reason I always have been like autopiloting bishop g3, and I'm a little bit stupid for that. I really gotta fix that with my chess. It's always nice to like find little problems for me to work on, but yeah, that's a little bit of a problem, but it's not that big of a deal. My opponent goes bishop e7 anyway. I go knight to e4, attacking this pawn, and I'm saying, okay, if you take here, I'm gonna take back. Maybe no, if you take here, I'm gonna take back with the knight. I'm trying to get my knight in here. I'm also threatening this move in knight d6, which I really like. The reason why I spent 30 seconds on this move was because I was understanding that knight d6 is a really nice threat, because after takes, then you can't castle anymore, which is really cool. And I'm also stopping him from castling just in general, since I'm attacking the pawn. And one other thing, if he takes on d4, I'm going to recapture with my knight, and my opponent can try to castle. But I thought that here, at the very least, I have knight c6, and I'm getting the bishop here, which is enough. But actually, I probably have a move like knight d6, which is a little bit better, trying to get rid of the dark squared bishop instead of the light squared bishop. Because light squared bishop isn't actually doing that much, even though it's on the long diagonal. And me getting control of the dark squares here would be really useful, which is really instructive. Yeah, not something that I really realized. But I was just thinking knight c6, and white is better. Instead of that, after the move knight e4, my opponent blunders. My opponent makes a huge mistake. But it really didn't look like one during the game. my opponent played the move queen to b6, which really looks like it's a really good move. Like, it's an incredible move. It does everything you want a move to do. My threat was knight d6. You stop knight d6. You're defending the pawn as well. And I was thinking here for a while, trying to find the right option. The computer even wants knight e5, which I don't even really understand. Oh, I guess the idea is that just after like this, bishop e5, and like, I don't know, my opponent doesn't really have a way to like defend the pawn. Like here, I even have, oh, I just attack him with queen g4, and there's, oh, that's really powerful. Okay, that I wasn't really considering stuff like that. I didn't realize the attack was where I was going. I was only really looking on the queen side here, but I guess the attack is very powerful. Either way, queen b6. I just found a line where I win a pawn, so I played that. I played dc5, which just, okay, wins a pawn. Like, okay, yeah, I thought maybe I'm gonna be able to get something really good here if I really work on it. But at the end of the day, this wins a pawn. I get a concrete advantage. I didn't see anything wrong with it. It's at least going to be +1, I think. It's at least going to be +1. And even though I've lost maybe some of my advantage, I'm still going to be winning, which is not bad. And I'm happy with that evaluation. dc5, my opponent takes back with a knight. It's actually one of the best moves, which is a little bit surprising me. I didn't think dc5 was the best move. Either way, knight c5, bishop c5. And my idea of this was to play the move knight to e5. And the reason why this wins a pawn, I believe, the reason why this wins a pawn is because, how does it win a pawn? Wait, what? There was like, I'm so confused. I really thought this won a pawn when I was playing it. Did I just miss my line? Maybe the pawn came later. Maybe the pawn came later. You know what? Maybe the pawn came later. I'm really confused. But either way, 95 is still winning. For some reason, I thought I won a pawn here. I guess not. Maybe I guess my pawn came later. But I was up a pawn in this game. Either way, 95 is a very excellent move. He can't play castles due to the fact that rook comes here and then knight here is a fork of the rook and the queen, which is really active. And my main idea of 95 is to play queen a4, keep the king in the center, and stop bishop c6. That's the point of 95, is to stop bishop c6 and stop castling. And it's really good. There's not much my opponent can do. He plays rook d8 though, which is a good move, trying to get castling going. But then I have queen a4, and already you can see that my position is coming alive, and black has to put their king in the center. My opponent here thinks for a long time, but there's not much to really think about. I guess he was considering the difference between king f8 and king up, but there's, okay, king f8 is a death sentence. What are we even doing? Maybe he was calculating that, like, in the future he wants to sack on this square, which I was also considering because I thought that could be a big issue. But I didn't think too much of it. I obviously thought my opponent was going to play king e7, and he does after a minute of thought, which is just insane. Like, that's a really bad time waste. Yeah, I haven't spent enough time in this position either, but that is not good. That is very not good. I go bishop c4 after some thought, and this is the first mistake I make in the game. Here what I can do is I can just play calmly. I can go rook fd1. I can go bishop to e2. I was calculating all this stuff. The idea is that my opponent has their rook in conjunction with my bishop, so this sacrifice becomes a thing, and I have to be a little bit careful, because like my knight is gonna get kicked out with f6 at some point. That's the point. So I could have played rook fd1, which would have been a really good move. Queen c2 is something the computer gives. Bishop e2 is something the computer gives. I was thinking about bishop e4 as well, but I didn't really understand bishop e4. I don't even know what the evaluation is. It's a better move than bishop c4, I guess, because I'm pinning the bishop, pinning the knight to the bishop. Like after this move, this like simply doesn't work because like this or something. Nope, we're not getting mated. No, I just take. I don't mind this. Okay. Nope. Rook takes f7. Okay, great. I'm so good at chess. Instead of all that, my opponent didn't sack the knight and bishop c4. Simply the idea is to grab the knight at some point, and then I have pressure, and then my other rook comes in the game, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like get this pawn at some point because it's super weak. And if my opponent ever pushes, then that pawn comes weak, and the light squares become weak, and my bishop comes to here at some point, which is really, really nice. My opponent goes to f6, which makes a lot of sense. I think for a little bit, and I find the best move. Obviously, the most natural move is knight f3, but it's not correct. We have to play the right form of chess, so I play knight d3, which is really good, attacking the bishop and targeting the pawn, and now I am actually going to win a pawn, and this is where I win the pawn, and now I remember the game properly. You might think bishop c6 works, but bishop c6 never works due to queen takes a6, I thought, and life is good. I thought my opponent might have to like probably trade queens with me, and actually no, here he can't trade queens. He has to play bishop d6 is what the computer gives, and white is just winning. But never mind all that. My opponent here plays bishop d6, trying to move the bishop out of the way of the knight targeting it, because if the knight was able to grab the bishop and I got the bishop pair, I would be winning the game in more ways than one, in looks as well, but probably not. Bishop d6 is a good move. I simply realize, you know what, I'm just going to win a pawn, so I take on d6. Rook takes d6, I take on d5, rook takes d5, and I simply play knight takes b4. I was also really thinking about queen takes b4, but I ended up rejecting this just on intuition alone. Like, I just thought, no, I don't want to trade the queens right now. I don't know if this is good or not. It feels like my opponent gets a lot of play with something even like rook d2 or rook b5. Rook d7 is the best move here, just stopping rook c2. And even though I'm up a pawn, black actually has a ton of play, and it's really not clear cut. So I'm glad that I didn't trade the queens. Instead, knight b4, rook b5, a3, which I thought was the best move. Not at all. I gotta play rook c4. I didn't even realize this. For some reason, I thought this move was really strong, but here, of course, I have knight takes d5 with a check, and I didn't see this. This was one of the things that I missed in this game, but it doesn't really matter. Instead of that, I play a3. My opponent goes a5, of course, and I've kind of lost all my advantage. But I didn't think I was worse, and I'm not. I'm still up a pawn, and I thought I'm holding on to my pawn. I'm like, you know what? I kind of like my position. I don't think it's that bad. Maybe my rook is coming in here at some point, trying to sack the rook to get this rook. I don't know. I think my position's okay. It feels okay, and it's not the most okay. My opponent has a ton of play. Rook d8. I immediately blunder the game away, which is just really rough. I didn't see this move at all. I didn't see the reason why this blundered. I played rook fd1, but this is just already losing, which is really, really rough. I'm already in a ton of trouble because rook bd5, which makes sense, but I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to be okay here. I'll play, I don't know. I didn't even think too hard on this move. I just thought, you know what, white is fine. I played queen c2, which I thought just made a ton of sense, but it's a second blunder. And I didn't even realize I had blundered in the first place. So when you get hit with two blunders in a row, it's really, really bad. I thought my opponent was going to play something like bishop a6, and then we would trade the rooks, and my opponent would win this pawn. And at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a draw, but I'm going to play a4. And I don't know, maybe I have some plays. King is kind of wide open. So I already knew I made a mistake, but I didn't realize, like, this was the mistake. Queen c2, bishop a6 is what he played, but it gives me the draw. What he has to play here is just kind of insane. The move queen c2 loses the knight. How does it lose the knight? How is that possible? How is it possible that queen c2 is losing the knight? And the reason why it's possible, and the reason why it is because queen d6. Then you're saying, what? We just trade the queens, and at the end of the day, life is good. Like, he has to come back, and then, I don't know, I trade. Well, maybe I don't trade. I can even play rook dc1 in that line. But let's say this move, because this move makes a lot more sense. No highlights. It makes a lot more sense. Takes, let's say takes. And I don't know, I can play like f3. And then knight f2, and white is probably better. The reason why this is really good is that after takes, rook d7, queen takes d6, rook, not rook 7 d6, because then I get rook c7 check, rook 5 d6. I'm not in time to play f3 because my knight is hanging, but I play rook c3. My opponent simply has moved bishop a3, bishop a6. And there's nothing I can do. There's just nothing I can do. I'm just losing the knight. Which is just terrible. I didn't see that line. Didn't see that line. Instead, my opponent plays bishop a6, which made a lot of sense. Played knight f4, which is the most active move. It's a draw here. Well, it's equal here. I thought it was equal after takes, takes. I'll just put the moves on the board. Takes, 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 takes a4. But I was just like, you know what? I think white is pushing. I'm not. G5 is very, very powerful. I guess the move I have to play is h4, and actually black is pushing, which is tough. I wasn't really thinking about that. I guess, I don't know. The game would probably conclude with like queen c2, here. I don't know, maybe queen e5, and I don't know. The game proceeds. It's not that complicated. I can take on h7, make the g5 pawn on move. It doesn't really matter that much. I don't know. But knight f4, my opponent doesn't do that. Instead, my opponent goes with a really, really stupid move, and it completely loses the game. Rook c5, white wins. Game over. Game over. And the reason why it wins is so really, really obvious. Let's see what pieces my pieces attack in this position. Oh wow, it looks like my queen is attacking the pawn on h7. Oh wow, that pawn is not defended. Oh wow, it also attacks the king in the future. Oh wow, if I got queen to h7, I would be completely winning. I wonder what the best move here is. Well, it's got to be queen b1. Yeah, it's got to be queen b1. Yeah, okay. Definitely queen b1. I didn't... Oh, yeah, obviously. Yeah, totally. Instead of that, I did have queen h7, which is just really, really glaring. That's really stupid of me to miss that move, but queen b1, I had a minute and a half on the clock. It's not that embarrassing, but not that good of a move, and the rest of the game after this point is pretty bad just because of the time scramble. It's a little bit funny, but it was instructive for a while, you know? My opponent takes on d1, which is a stupid move in my opinion, because it gives me the d file. I take back with the rook. My opponent goes f5, blocking my queen's access to h7, which I realized I had missed at this point. I go h3 after a long think, which is 18 seconds, really too long. I just couldn't find a move, so I ended up playing h3. I had the move b4 here, which is very, very nice. I could have done that, but instead h3, just making it left for my king, can't be a bad move. Rook b5, I play the move queen d3, because I thought this was very cool. Now, after the rook blocks the bishop, he doesn't have any good discoveries because my queen is always in time, and this move, while it looks nice, this is a check. Actually, even after rook d5, I would have queen takes d5, which is nice because at the end of the day, I get a fork of the king and the queen, which is a pretty easy tactic to see, at least at my level. My opponent here goes queen c7, which made sense. I think here for a little bit, I just move my queen out of the way. I go queen d2, not active. I gotta go queen d4. Sorry about that. Gotta go queen d4, target this pawn. This would be completely winning. It looks like this is good, but obviously here I have knight d5, which is nice, and my opponent will probably have to sack the rook, and yeah, obviously winning. Instead, queen d2 is the move chosen. After 10 seconds of thought, already very, very bad. And I have to play very, very fast for the rest of the game. Otherwise, I'm going to lose on time, and it will be very embarrassing. My opponent goes bishop b7. I quickly go rook c1, just attacking the queen. Queen d7. I think about it, but I go queen c3. I think about trading. I mean queen c3, targeting this pawn, trying to get in over here. My opponent goes king f7. I go knight h5. We repeat moves once, and then I decide to change it off, and I quickly play the move queen to c7, which is just a mistake. I gotta go a4. but you know, low time. I played this move in less than a second, so I think that it's okay. Might have even pre-moved this. But queen takes c7, rook takes c7 check, and it's really rough. I defend my pawn. This was my idea. Knight e2, knight at c3. I want my king to come in. I play f3, which I thought made a lot of sense. Here, I simply have knight takes e4, but again, time pressure is awful, and this is very hard to see with playing like every move in a second. So f3, king f2, king e1. I'm trying to bring my king over to the queen side, and maybe to the center. Rook d6. My opponent comes in with a king. I go rook d7. For some reason, I don't even take the pawn on h7, which is the whole point. I go there. I instead play king e2, king d2 in 0.3 seconds, which is pretty good. h5, rook h7, and the blunders start appearing on the board. Rook d8, g4. I don't take the free pawn. I just take this pawn. I take again, and I go check. I come back. I go here, and now here's the blunders. Rook a6. That's an easy fork. Even with 6 seconds on the clock, my opponent should be able to see that, but he doesn't. Instead, king f6. I go rook a5, rook h8, rook b5. Blunders the same exact fork, so I didn't see it twice in a row, which is kind of funny. But I don't even know. I could even just take. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I guess not, but whatever. Instead, this blunders the same fork. He doesn't see it again. Rook h2. I move my king up, simply losing a pawn, but my idea was that after king e4, I'm very active, and after this, I thought I had the move knight takes a4, but I realized as soon as I played it, I do not, because of bishop c2 check, attacking the king, discovered attack on the rook. I would be losing the game here. My opponent doesn't find that because he has 2 seconds on the clock, and I'm able to flag my opponent very, very easily. Rook f2, I take the bishop. Here, I bring my king back, and I bring my knight to the center. I didn't even realize my king was attacking the rook. I didn't even realize that. I just pre-moved this move, but my opponent does not have the time spent to wait, so knight c5 ends the game on the spot with a nice little victory for me. And this is why you shouldn't play b5 on move 2, because it is a stupid opening and white will win. Either way, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe to all the normal things YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.